My shoes made a quiet, uneven rhythm as I stepped down the long, echoing hospital corridor. Mom's shuffling gait was barely audible above the humming of those fluorescent lights overhead, but every now and then, the wheeze of her breath stopped, and she had to clutch the wall for support. I watched each movement, anxious and helpless, but what strung more was the gaze she shot back at me over her shoulder, sharp, silent, somehow brimming with disappointment after all these years. Father was waiting on the bench outside Auntie Josephine's ward, his broad shoulders hunched more than I remembered. He wore a threadbare khaki jacket, collar stained, his ankles peeking from battered shoes. When he met my eyes, his lips twitched, restraint fighting the urge to say what he'd never said directly in all the years since I walked out of this building as a teenager, carrying my violin case in one hand and my terrified heart in the other. I tried, I really did. I said, "Let's not start, please. I came as soon as I could. How is Josephine?" Before either could answer, my cousin Henry burst out from the elevator, his voice bouncing through the sterile corridor. "She wants you to play for her, her favorite. Maybe it'll bring her some peace, eh?" Play, I almost laughed, or maybe I wanted to cry. I hadn't brought my violin. I hadn't thought this would be a homecoming. It was an emergency, a summons, a test of whatever was left of my old life, what my family once meant to me, what Nairobi meant to me. Yet, already they wanted the part of me they'd spent years saying had no place here at all. Father drew a sharp breath. All this music foolishness, she is dying and you come empty-handed, was town so important? His words fell like cold water on my skin. Years melted in that moment, and I was 17 again, trembling just inside our tin-roofed house in Pangani, clutching my battered violin while the rain battered the windows. "What's the use?" he demanded then, arms crossed over his threadbare vest. "It's not a real job, no one eats notes for supper." I stared at him and felt the old pain like a stitch in my stomach, but this time I didn't shrink. I set my lips and said gently, "I flew overnight to be here, Baba. I'm sorry about the violin." Mother glanced from one to the other and touched my shoulder with light, hesitant fingers. "Let's not quarrel, not here, not today." The nurse said Josephine is waiting, just visit her first. We walked together, a lopsided procession, into Josephine's room, my father at the front, rigid, my mother hovering beside me, Henry lingering behind as if caught between worlds. Josephine looked smaller than ever, a fragile wisp in rumpled blue linen, her face drawn, smile twitching weakly as she struggled to sit up, but her eyes were fierce. She patted the empty chair by her bedside. "Come, sit. Tell me your stories." I sat, knees pressed together, and let her take my hand. Her skin was dry and feverish. "They won't tell me anything, but I can see from your face, you've been somewhere good, somewhere that likes musicians. Is it true?" I nodded, my throat tightened. So I told her first because I owed her, and because I needed to say these words to someone from home, someone who'd once snuck out at dawn to listen to me practice under the jacaranda tree. I went to Vienna, studied there, played in Berlin, Paris at the Philharmonie. There's a recording too, and next week I'm with the Nairobi Philharmonic. Henry let out a low whistle. Mother looked at me, then away. Father's face barely changed. Josephine's smile widened, a thin beam of sunlight in the clinical loneliness. "You see," she croaked at Henry, "Nairobi Philharmonic, our Moses is a star." Henry grinned. "Maybe he can play for us. Tomorrow I'll find a violin from the church. We'll show all those people who laughed at him." Father shifted in his chair, discomfort etched in the tightness of his jaw. Mother squeezed my hand, nervous, almost apologetic. But Josephine closed her eyes, her fingers wrapped hard around mine, refusing to let go, even as her breathing slowed and steadied. "I always said you'd make it," she whispered. After that, everything blurred, a swirl of doctors, hushed prayers, old family friends arriving and leaving, the corridor brightening then fading as the sun rose and fell. By the second evening, the hospital was more familiar than the cramped house I'd left as a boy. While Henry wrangled a violin through his church contacts, I drifted through the city, old wounds reopening at every corner, old familiar faces peering as I passed. Some still recognized me, some smirked, as if waiting for evidence that I'd failed and come crawling back. Nairobi was noisier than I remembered. The city shrieked, matatus roaring, hawkers calling over the rising hum of traffic. I moved through it in a trance, partly reliving the day I left, suitcase in one hand, violin slung over my shoulder, the shame in father's eyes burning in my back. The things people said then still strung: daydreamer, useless, no one needs a violinist in Kenya. They joked about it through school, through church, at every family gathering, until even my name became a sort of curse. I never forgot the snickers, boys on bicycles jeering when my music teacher came to fetch me, men at the fruit stand snickering about Vienna, the place I worshipped from the brittle pages of my grandfather's German dictionary. Everyone, it seemed, grew up to be something practical, and I'd grown up to be an embarrassment. That night Henry called triumphant. "Bakari says we can use the church, people want to hear you, Sunday evening." Even Baba agreed, his voice softened, "Don't be late." I didn't sleep much. My mind teemed with memories of long hours practicing on the veranda, of the day father sold half the goats to pay Josephine's hospital bills, and then caught me begging neighbors for music books, of the times I pretended the rotting wooden bridge outside the slum was some grand European stage. For years I carried their laughter in my veins like poison. Even in Vienna, even when the applause came, it was that laughter I heard first. Sunday came with a sky the blue of a battered raincoat. I found myself in the church before sunset, hands sweating, heart thundering beneath my shirt. The violin Henry brought me was old and scarred, but the strings were sound, the bow worn but steady. I tuned it, fingers trembling as people slipped into the pews, neighbors, uncles, children wobbling in their Sunday best. There were faces I hadn't seen in a decade, faces I barely remembered, and each one stared as if expecting not music but disaster. Henry fussed at the door, ushering in my parents, who sat stiff-backed in the front row, father's arms crossed, jaw set. For a moment I wondered if I should leave, just walk out, take the violin, disappear into the city until the airplane swept me back to the cold, forgiving anonymity of Europe. But then Josephine arrived, swaddled and frail, her head on my mother's shoulder. Henry helped her to the second pew. She winked. A hush fell as I stood. I introduced myself, words slow and soft. "Some of you know me. Many of you knew me as the boy with the violin. Tonight I just want to play for Josephine and for home." I lifted the bow to the strings. The opening notes of Bach drifted through that wooden space, sweet, mournful, trembling at first, then swelling into confidence. The acoustics surprised me, the warm resonance, the way every overtone stayed in the air like the memory of rain after a long drought. Faces watched, rigid, uncertain, some sneering quietly, but then they changed. I saw Auntie Miriam dabbing her eyes, old Mr. Odhiambo leaning forward, lips parted in wonder. The children sat quiet, stunned. The music grew, built, soared. With every phrase, the old pain softened. I gave them all I had, notes shaped by years of struggle, by hunger, by nights reading music under flickering candlelight while storms battered the city outside. I played for all the times I was laughed at, for every useless and every waste. I played until my arms ached, until the bowstring frayed. When I finished, a silence hung heavier than applause. Then Josephine started clapping, frail, stubborn, radiant. Someone else joined in. Slowly the church walls filled with thunder, not laughter, not scorn, but something that sounded suspiciously like pride. It was only when Henry ran up, grinning, pulling me into a hug, that I realized tears had fallen down my face. I wiped them away but didn't care who saw. Even father stood and walked over, hesitant, uncertain. For the first time I saw the fight drain from his eyes. He nodded, slow, grave, then gripped my shoulder. "That was good," he said, scarcely audible above the crowd. "Truly good," he turned and added, almost to himself, "I didn't know." The proof, however, was not just in applause. The next day, reporters called. Someone had posted a video of the performance online. "Nairobi's forgotten son returns." The headlines ran on all the blogs, Twitter, even the newspaper, with the crumpled photograph of me at 12, holding my first violin with a shy, stubborn smile. Old teachers came to the church, friends from the music school. Bakari offered the church for a weekly concert, for the community, for the children who want to play. Even the City Arts Council tracked me down, requesting I guest lead a youth workshop. But it was on Tuesday, when I returned to the hospital, violin in hand, to play a private concert for Josephine, that the proof turned from public spectacle to private redemption. The ward was quiet. Most patients dozed or watched me through curtain gaps. Father and mother were by Josephine's bedside, both older than I'd remembered. I played again, slow, gentle, a lullaby this time for her alone. When I finished, Josephine was crying quietly. Mother held her hand. Father sat silent but watchful. "I wish they could all see you now," Josephine whispered. "They thought you were lost." "So did I sometimes," I admitted. "But I never stopped playing, even when it hurt." Mother reached over awkwardly at first and hugged me just as she'd done when I was a child, shaking with fever. It felt like forgiveness or maybe a kind of acceptance. Walking home after, violin case in hand, I followed the dirt roads that led toward Pangani. The jacarandas were in bloom, clouds of purple hanging over the cracked sidewalks. I let the city envelope me, the sense of wood smoke, the whistles of distant train engines, Matatu radios blaring. Nairobi would never be Vienna, and I was not the boy who left, but I was not a stranger anymore. I was not a joke or a shameful secret. One day later, the Nairobi Philharmonic debut sold out. Father sat front row and smiled as I stood, not with bitterness but with pride, a different man from the one I left behind. After the concert, he introduced me to his friends, to strangers. My son, the musician, he said, and nothing more was needed. I spent the days that followed teaching, performing, visiting Josephine until the end. At her funeral, the church was packed. I played her favorite melody, watched the whole community watch me, not with scorn but with reverence, and knew I had come full circle. If there was triumph, it was this, that the laughter had faded. That the music finally spoke louder than all their doubts. In the still Nairobi nights, I sometimes took out my violin and stood beneath the jacaranda, notes curling into the dark. The city listened now, not as a skeptic but as witness. And in that listening, in that gentle acknowledgement, I found peace. I found at last my way home.